course, thank you to Stephen Michaels for having the courage to give a guy like me the microphone. That's a very scary prospect to do, so if everyone would please give him an applause. And, of course, an applause for all the great speakers. I don't know how I'm going to follow this act that just went down, of course, all day long. But please do give another applause for that. Now, what I actually just did was made sure that this YouTube video, I'm going to assume this video will be on YouTube, will be the most remembered because it will have the one with the most applause. Because this will be 2 times that I've already gotten you to give applause, and then the 3rd and the 4th time, hopefully, at the end. So thank you for that. As far as why am I here? Why am I up here? What do I do? Who am I? Of course, I am Dr. Brian Sovryn. I do have a show called Sovryn Tech, and of course, it's Sovryn. Just make sure you spell my name right, of course, and you can go to SovrynTech.com and you can check that sort of thing out. I talk about Bitcoin. Been talking about Bitcoin for a few years now. I have spoke at other events, and it's a real pleasure to be here for this one. Now, the title of my talk is Life 4.0, which is, bring it down, okay. Life 4.0, thriving in virtual worlds with cryptocurrencies and digital self-image. Now, what does all that mean? Virtual worlds are just that, virtual worlds. We're talking about virtual reality. Does everybody here know what virtual reality is? Yeah, okay, I'm going to assume you do. You put on the goggles and suddenly you're somewhere else. Usually it's a bunch of polygons or something along those lines. Does everybody know what augmented reality is? This is very different. Did everybody know augmented reality? Yeah, augmented reality is where you are placing perhaps those same polygons just over the real world. Like suddenly you'd look out that window and maybe you'd see Spider-Man just swing right across while you're wearing Google Glass or something along those lines. Now, a lot of what I'm going to talk about here, this is pretty information dense, a lot of what I'm going to talk about does not relate directly to augmented reality or AR. I'm mainly dealing with virtual reality, but a lot of it could be applied to AR if you're curious about this. And I'm really honored because a lot of the conversations that just came up here in that great panel will dovetail into what I'm talking about, even if you don't realize it at first. Please stick with me through to the end. I love Bitcoin. I assume everybody here does. That's why they're here. And the reason I love Bitcoin is because of the financial freedom that it offers. As Stephen said, I am a liberty lover. I don't mind saying I'm an anarchist. So in my opinion, that's a good reason to listen to me because I don't care for rules. And in business, we all know there are no, okay, rules, I'll say it. So do listen. It's a good, those are people with good perspectives because Satoshi obviously didn't play by any rules either, other than perhaps some economic rules. With virtual reality, I think that you can take the principles that Bitcoin proved, that you can have financial freedom, permissionless financial freedom. With virtual reality, I think we have the opportunity to have freedom of association, freedom of property, we'll get into that, and it's going to sound very different than perhaps some of what you just heard here. But there's going to be a lot of freedoms that are going to be possible due to this. And what I'm going to describe to you may sound pie in the sky, but I am going to prove to you by the end that none of it is pie in the sky and all of it can be done right now. Because one thing about me is I hate to wait. I am not a patient person. I want things happening right now. When I heard about Bitcoin and when I saw the potential for the financial freedom that it gave, I jumped right on it. Wasted no time whatsoever as soon as I understood it. And I think virtual reality will be the same case. Now, is virtual reality a viable thing? What stage are we at with virtual reality? Some people remember the history of virtual reality. How many people here grew up in the 90s? Okay. Old folks. No, I'm kidding. Me too. In the 90s, we thought that virtual reality was just going to be the biggest thing. It was going to happen very quickly. All of this was going to get developed. But it ran into some issues. Maybe some people remember the Nintendo Virtual Boy. Anybody remember this? This is a little game console. It was on a little tripod. You had to get down very, very low. Really, if you weren't a little kid, it was an incredibly impractical thing to do. You could only play according to the warnings on the device itself. And it was this like goggle thing, and everything was all red. According to the warnings for every game that you bought and for the device, it said that you couldn't play for more than a half hour at a time. Now, any gamers here? Any big-time gamers? Yeah, we got a couple. All right, right on. Have you ever just played for a half hour? No, yeah, that's warming it right. Exactly. Your thumbs are just getting going at a half hour, so forget that. So that's ridiculous. So virtual reality ran into some very early problems in that the technology wasn't there. There's the issue of tracking your movements, tracking your head. The picture wouldn't match up with your own movements, all of this, that wasn't there. It was very expensive to put all this together as well. The infrastructure was ridiculously expensive. Nintendo tried their best. Other companies tried their best. And in fact, it's hilarious. You would see perhaps at malls in the 90s you would go into, and they'd have these big virtual reality setups, and you thought you were seeing the future. And people looked absolutely ridiculous with these gigantic goggles on. I mean, just massive. You don't even know how they kept their heads up. It was mind-boggling to see. And they'd be in some kind of ring, and it all just seemed so crazy. If you weren't the one doing it, it looked nuts. And even when you were in the virtual world, when you were doing that, everything was mainly what they would call vector graphics at the time, where there was lines going across. You've probably seen older games of this, like stuff out of the 80s or whatever. There was a classic game, Red Bear, and there was all blue lines, and you're supposed to imagine that was an airplane and all that stuff. So all of these elements put together, and of course the expense of the hardware at the time, made virtual reality a failure. Just like perhaps some people could describe that there were precursors to Bitcoin, or that there were precursors to Twitter, or that there were precursors to all different kinds of technologies that we have now. Not that the ideas were necessarily the ideas existed before, just the implementation wasn't there, and now we're starting to see the implementation of these things, like virtual currencies or digital currencies or cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and others, like things like Twitter and the rest. Now we're starting to see companies get involved with virtual reality. And ironically, most of them are setting up for failure. Oculus Rift. Has anybody heard of the Oculus Rift? Okay, yeah, Facebook bought this out. They know that this is the future coming. And to some degree, I think it is the future coming. But we've already seen that's supposed to be coming out. These are more of that big goggle stuff that's supposed to be coming out next year. And it's going to be pretty expensive as far as we can tell. Not just the expense of like wearing a $200 headset, you're going to have to hash that money out, but also you're going to have the expense of the new computer that can actually handle that entire virtual realm to the degree that they want to go. So you're talking about a multi-$1,000 buy-in into this whole idea. That is a barrier to entry, and that's a problem. One of the beauties of cryptocurrencies, one of the beauties of Bitcoin, is there any barrier to entry? Did anybody here today pay to open a Bitcoin wallet? No. It's totally free. You just pop it in, there you go. Part of the reason that was possible is because you already had the hardware. You already have the infrastructure in your pocket to be able to do that. That's why these wallets can be so free. And we're going to get into that with perhaps how that relates to virtual reality in just a second. But what I want to talk about is what are the possibilities first with virtual reality itself. We have the issue, one of the wonderful things about Bitcoin, perhaps the most impressive thing about Bitcoin, is the fact that you can cross borders with perhaps a brain wallet, and nobody knows how much money you have. Nobody can take that money from you. Unless they come out with thought readers, you're gold. You can just walk right by, and you cross into Mexico and get to a computer, and suddenly, you've got all your money, and if you're a millionaire with Bitcoin, good for you, you've got it. But that doesn't work very well for the issue of property. And that also there may be other issues with that too. But what could be done with virtual reality, and this may not be a shock to some people, but I want you to stick through this with me. What could be done with virtual reality is creating virtual property that means just as much to you as any physical property that you hold. And we'll get into more of this. But one thing I want to bring up is that, do you know where do you think let's say the average American spends most of their time outside of work? Any guesses? Facebook? Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, physical space, it would be the living room, okay? And in the living room, of course, what's the centerpiece of the living room? The television. Yeah, the television. Now, what is the most attached device or most successful attached device in the past 2 years to the television, which is the centerpiece of the space where the average American spends most of their time outside of work? The PlayStation 4. Now, the PlayStation 4 is banking heavy on virtual reality. It's called Project Morpheus. And I actually want to quote the head of Sony worldwide. This is Yoshida-san. And he said, we used to say seeing is believing, but now we're saying experiencing is believing. And his point in that is that the experiences are the things that people are looking for. They just want to experience it. They don't necessarily want to own it. And this is true. Consider Netflix. How many people watch movies on Netflix here? Yeah, pretty much. Or Hulu, take your pick. Okay, everybody. You don't own those movies. And you don't mind. It was only 10 years ago that you were holding DVDs or Blu-rays. You just totally accept the fact that this is how I experience theater now, or television, or whatever the case may be. And it almost happened literally overnight, because Netflix even used to send you physical copies of something. So you can accept, or people do accept, and they are accepting more and more all the time, the idea of not owning, say, their entertainment or other things, or some of their goods. So I think people are getting very much primed for virtual property, for digital property, that they do not hold in their hand, but that they can experience because they already have the devices that allow for it to be done, and it allows it to be done in very inexpensive ways. So imagine that you have this beautiful living room. Or, let's say you're taking your Bitcoin, for whatever reason, you're leaving America. I don't blame you. Admittedly, I'm a little more concerned about America's foreign policy than I am its domestic policy, so I'll stay right here. But I can understand why people want to leave. If you went, from America to Mexico, and you were concerned, kind of like Tone Vase had that great talk earlier. He was talking about where, what was it, going into Germany or whatever the case may be, where they're going to check your gold, they're going to make sure everything, it seems all very controlling over your property. You have to register any property. What was it? Any property over $100, they'd have to register. Yeah, right. Okay. So all of that. What if you could have all that property though, and they'd never know you had it? Well, that's the thing, is that you could create an entire virtual living room, an entire virtual living existence, and have all those things, all those niceties, all those experiences, and all of those memories. Maybe that's what some of this physical stuff means to you, is a representative of memories that you had. You could have all of these things by just putting on a pair of goggles. And then say when someone comes knocking, asking, papers please, or whatever, what do you have, what would you like to declare? No, nothing to declare. But yet you can still just in an instant experience that life. And then imagine that with smartphones, everybody's completely interconnected, and you could share that living experience just like anywhere, at any time, just like you would asking a friend to come over to the house. That's the potential here, is to free up with Bitcoin, with cryptocurrencies, as the ability to buy things independently, and with the ability to carry your wealth with you digitally. You can now also privately and that's one of the beauties of cryptocurrencies, is the ability to buy these things with privacy. That's really important. We'll get more into the buying things in just a second. But the point is that you could carry everything you've got anywhere you are in the world at any given time. Now, some people are taking this pretty far. Some intentional communities, you can say. I'm a member of what's called the Free State Project. You can go to freestateproject.org to check out about that. Thank you. Got a little clap for that one. And this is, pretty much a project of getting 20,000 liberty-loving people to one geographic area and coming together. Okay. Now, it's very difficult because a lot of people freak out about this because they go, oh, New Hampshire is so cold, and that's where it is. It's based out of New Hampshire. Okay, and whatever the case may be, or people just can't, they can't uproot their families, however it goes, and so they don't come together. But what if you could create projects, and what if you could create intentional communities that were just completely virtual, and people could be a part of it and join up at any time, wherever they are in the world, at any given moment, and that would allow for that real freedom of association. This is what virtual reality can allow for. And the real beauty of it all that I want to get into is that this isn't expensive. To make it realistic, to make all, to really get you lost perhaps, and I don't mean lost as in, forget about reality, because reality is reality and you need to pay attention to it. But to get lost, at least for now, because I don't see, a lot of the tyrannical things that go on today, I don't see it going away anytime soon. I know some people say, well, it's going to crash in such and so many years, whatever the case may be. I don't believe that myself. I think that if you want to, your best bet is to just try and be happy now and get together with people, friends and loved ones and all that case may be. And I think virtual reality can make that far more possible very quickly. And the beauty is that this is not an expensive thing. To have these real-life experiences in a virtual realm doesn't cost much at all. It doesn't require a gigantic headset. It doesn't require, massive cages for you to walk around in. All of this can be done. And there's companies out there, believe me, they're spending thousands of dollars on making all this happen. In fact, even with augmented reality, you have Microsoft with the HoloLens. They just announced it'll be coming out next year. That's going to be $3,000. None of that's needed. It's very simple, and I'm going to show you how it can be done right now for practically nothing. Anybody know what that is? Cardboard. This is called Google Cardboard. I'm not a fan of Alphabet, that's Google's parent company now. But they really turned everybody else, including Facebook and other companies, they turned them all into a big joke when they released this, because this costs about $2 to put together. It is literally nothing but cardboard, an NFC tag, and a couple of stereoscopic lenses. That's all that's here. And yet it can provide that virtual experience that I'm talking about. And I'll show you real quick just what that looks like. Phone? Goes in like that. You just unvelcro, put the phone in front of the stereoscopic lenses, and suddenly I'm on Mars. That's it. I think I paid $7 for that piece of cardboard right there. You want to talk about a barrier to entry? There's no barrier to entry here. In fact, the virtual, it's so funny because there's a consulting firm, Trictica. They said that by 2020, they expect virtual reality and augmented reality software and hardware to be a $22 billion business. And Bitcoin could be a part of that. Cryptocurrencies could be a part of that. Your whole life could be a big part of that. There is money to be made in this deal. Now, I don't expect to make any money within virtual reality. I'm just looking for freedom. That's what I'm trying to express to you, is that I want that freedom of my property that I can carry with me that makes life so much simpler. But the beauty is that everybody's already in on this. Everybody already has the infrastructure. This is why virtual reality is going to work this time. This is why Bitcoin's working this time. This is why so many of these technological ideas that have been around forever are finally starting to work again, and that's because everybody already hashed out $200 or however much for their phone. Maybe they got it for free through their carrier, and they're in. That's all it takes. It's a little bit of software. And people could write software. They could create all kinds of stuff. Even better, you could encrypt your entire virtual living existence. No one needs to see what you're doing. And this is where cryptocurrency comes in. That's really, really important. Because, kind of like William Gibson said, William Gibson is, everybody knows William Gibson, cyberpunk, the whole thing, neuromancer, all that stuff. He had a great quote where he said, virtual reality won't take off until there's some dirt in it. Now, he didn't mean like dirt that you pick up, like physical dirt. He meant that virtual reality is going to get freaky. Really freaky. Like people are going to let it out when they get into virtual reality. And I think that's a fine thing. Go ahead and let it do that. And you're going to see communities build around just those desires and those interests just from that. Because when life becomes about experiences, and when life goes to a more digital realm, which in many ways it already has. Most people are already spending 90% of their existence on Facebook anyway, right? Somebody in the audience had said that, and that's absolutely true. They're going to get on with this, and experiences are going to be about your desires becoming a reality far more than you traveling distances, going places, and things like that. It's all just going to be about your desires coming into fruition, and virtual reality is going to allow for that. And I think you're going to end up finding a whole lot of freedom connecting with these people, perhaps, like I said, in encrypted rooms that no eye can see, no one's tracking you, everything's anonymous, and then you can also purchase anonymously and privately when you put in things like Bitcoin. Okay, when you put in cryptocurrencies involved with this, because certainly Bitcoin needs a little work when it comes to anonymity and privacy and things of that nature. Perhaps taking on projects like ZeroCoin or what's now called Zero Cash by Matthew Green at Johns Hopkins. Because, I mean, then you can create entire virtual marketplaces, and you could look, I mean, imagine this, like take Overstock, Overstock.com. They take Bitcoin, right? Yay, good for Overstock. Okay, you could go into a virtual Overstock, and you could look at and pick up, maybe with just one other little piece of device, I'm sure they could make a cardboard glove, okay, that would work very well with your entire virtual experience. And you could pick things up and you could look around at it. And this isn't new either. This was Apple developed this, QuickTime VR. This is back in the 90s that they did this. All this stuff's already been, the ideas are already out there. It's just that the infrastructure was never there, and now it is here. With mobile phones, with these supercomputers, more or less, that we have in our pockets. So the other point I want to get to with this is that I have a concern with cryptocurrencies, and this is where virtual reality, I think, can solve this concern. And it was something that was getting talked about by all these, great gentlemen and lady that were here talking, and that is this idea of tagging property on a blockchain. I think this is a terrible idea. I mean, it's terrible. If you are going to tag physical property to a blockchain, and the whole point, as some of these people up here were saying, is to replace the purpose of government, how do you enforce that blockchain? How do you enforce that property? I don't think there's a good answer to that. I think when you start attaching property titles and whatever else is the case, when you start putting that onto blockchains for physical goods, I think you run into a huge issue. In fact, you may end up just creating a whole other government or a whole other, legislative body. And the beauty of cryptocurrencies was removing middlemen, right? Getting rid of the banks, getting rid of all this stuff. And so that's my worry, is that there's no way to when you start putting these things onto a blockchain, there's no real way to enforce that in a free manner, as in free as in freedom, not as in beer. So virtual property, however, could definitely, you could do that sort of thing, no problem. It'd all be stored on your smartphone, or it'd be stored on a hard drive, or whatever the case may be. And it's yours, and in fact, honestly, there's no reason for anybody to take it. There's no reason to even argue about titles, or whatever the case may be. Because, I mean, people can just, they could, with cryptocurrencies, they could buy their own. And there's an endless amount. I mean, it's nearly post-scarcity. And I know people bristle at that word, and I agree that could be kind of an issue. Okay, but regardless, it would almost be post-scarcity. Now, the wonderful thing about cryptocurrencies as well is because, like I said, you want to have that ability to pay for things anonymously. You want to have the way to pay for things privately because, like I said, virtual reality might get pretty freaky. Okay, and maybe you don't want your wife or your husband or whoever to really, know what exactly you're doing in this virtual realm. So Bitcoin, or cryptocurrencies in general, would allow for you to have, an anonymous wallet of some kind. And I can't really demo, unfortunately. This is the real problem with virtual reality. This is the other reason it never took off, is because how do you really display it without making somebody look ridiculous and, having them on stage like this and yada, yada, yada. I mean, that just gets kind of crazy. Okay. But one of the easy ways that people navigate now through virtual reality apps that already exist, one of the easy ways they do it is there will be a reticule, a little crosshairs. And you will look around, and you don't need a mouse, you don't need anything. All it is just this crosshairs on there, and there will be a button. And you could just look around, and wherever you hold that crosshair, that reticule, for more than a few seconds, it'll activate whatever's there. So what if in, say, like that virtual Overstock.com, or where maybe you set up your own virtual business, you just had a QR code next to every item, instantly set up by some form of software. You would instantly, anonymously, privately be able to pay with Bitcoin or with a cryptocurrency of whatever ilk, just by looking at something, and boom, it's done. It's the simplest way to ever pay Why? Because Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, it's magic internet money. I love that. I love that phrase, magic internet money. And this will be magic internet property. They're made for each other. It's a new system, a new way of living. Maybe it's not exactly what people are hoping for will come in the future, with a lot more freedom and all of that. But as far as having some freedom right now, some freedom of association, to be able to really communicate with people in all the ways that you've wanted to, that you were afraid to elsewhere. I think that these kind of technologies working together, virtual reality and cryptocurrencies, will allow people to associate in ways that they've only dreamed of. And yeah, why don't we go to some questions? I think we got time for some questions. Yes, Steve? Or Mike, go ahead.
I got the mic here.
All right.
Hi. I take it you weren't here yesterday because I did about a 10-minute presentation on Voxelus, which actually has a cryptocurrency that's coming out. Crowd still starts Monday, the pre-sales today. But what's interesting is I obviously did a lot of research on the whole VR market, and I've been doing this stuff since the 90s then. I saw a number as high as $150 billion for the combined AR/VR market. I saw $12 billion for just VR games alone.
Right.
And some of the stuff that didn't quite work in the early days, like Second Life, the technology wasn't quite there. But a lot of the things you're talking about in terms of the dirt, that's sort of one reason why the store owners ran away, because they were like trying to set up like a very pristine Coke and Pepsi storefront, and people would like throw giant penises at them. Yeah, so you have to kind of separate that. But now with not only the Google Cardboard and things like it, the whole Android system, Samsung, we announced the original Voxelus marketplace and creator at Oculus Connect. And even though they have the rather pricey PC-oriented one that Facebook's doing, they also license the software to Samsung. $99 this Christmas will work with any Samsung phone.
Right.
So that's going to be a game changer. There's 500,000 units on the market right now. They're expecting that to grow to 50 million in like 4.5 years. So just
absolutely. I think that those numbers are spot on. I imagined that was very conservative because, like you said, Samsung has already dropped that one down to $99. This is something this is happening. People want this. And the magic internet money that we're talking about all conference long is tailor-made to jump in on it. And your whole life, could be tailor-made to work with it. And just very...
And one last thing. I haven't seen any yet, but some friends of mine have seen VR porn, and they said it's life-changing.
Yeah, and interesting thing, actually statistics on that, interesting thing is that, because you can choose, do you want to be the guy or the woman? And most guys are choosing to be the woman. I don't know what that means, but anyway. Stephanie, you have a question?
Let me bring the microphone to you. So.
Yeah, I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit.
Sure.
In the TV show Star Trek, which I know you're a fan of.
Sure.
In the Star Trek universe, there's a lot of episodes that center around like characters who get addicted to the holodecks.
Right.
Which are basically virtual reality, but it's like you don't have to strap a thing onto your face. You can just walk into the room. So do you think that creating increasingly elaborate worlds in the virtual realm is kind of like a distraction or a running away from real life, basically? Like, is it a way to deny reality, basically, real reality in favor of virtual reality?
So there's the potential for that. In fact, there's a great quote by an author, Scott Adams. He said that the instant that virtual reality becomes cheaper than dating, our civilization is doomed. Like, it's all over. Humanity's done. But I would like, in turn, to quote another author, and science fiction's a great thing, especially like Star Trek. They've explored this endlessly, and I could touch more on that, perhaps. But Charles Stross, great author, he actually said that what people have found out is that the trick with virtual reality wasn't a problem with the technology. It was the fact that it needs people. And that as long as you build worlds that are that impressive, the people will come. And that's the point, I think, is that virtual reality won't... people may spend more time in virtual reality, but the experiences, I think, will come together the same there as to, it's just all about the experience. That's the point. Yes.
The same argument was made about AOL chat rooms in 1993.
Sure.
The same argument was made about kids playing too much video games.
Yep.
And I think for the most part, people will, sort of adapt different uses to it, but it's not the end of civilization when people started going in there. I mean, obviously with any technology, you can abuse it. But, I think, for example, with VR, there's a company that's sort of sister company of Oculus called Quantum Leap.
Yep.
Is going to be doing concerts where you basically strap on the glasses and you see, a Taylor Swift concert from like 6 different angles instead of having to go and fly and get backstage seats. And I think that's, and you get to chat with your friends and things like that. So it does, so Facebook, is by many people considered to be sort of a social media
right.
as opposed to like the chat rooms and like invisible friends and everything. And of course, Oculus got bought by Facebook, so you know where they're going with that.
Yeah, absolutely. If I could bring up one other point here, just as an example, as an analogy, Stephanie Murphy, of course, mentioned Star Trek. Does everybody know who the Borg is? This is like the ultimate of collectivism. Resistance is futile. This is the grand evil. Like it's government represented so beautifully. There are episodes where they explore that there's points where these certain Borg will go into, like they have to recharge at various points. They plug into a wall like good little drones that do all their work for their queen and everything. And they go to what's called Unimatrix Zero. And this is in many ways, kind of a dream world that they can all come together and they can all associate. The Borg Queen can't see inside of it, and they get to freely associate. They don't have all the rules working against them, or even their implants, whatever the case may be. And that's kind of what much of what I'm pushing for here is this idea of creating virtual communities where you can have the freedom that you're talking about. Because yes, it'll be great to work towards that, and so many people are. Bitcoin is a huge part of that. But to be able to have these realms, these digital realms that people can run to have freedom of expression and freedom of association, I think is really powerful to be building. But all of that requires anonymity, and all of that requires privacy, and a lot of these crypto technologies that have been developed only as of late, largely due to cryptocurrencies, and of course also thanks to Edward Snowden and some others. Steve.
So I have not necessarily a question, but an observation, and that is, and you probably touched on this. I had to step out for a second, but. Yeah. We're talking about virtual reality, but really it's reality. It's the new reality. So
sure.
One of the things I know when we discussed about doing this presentation was that how there's a unique opportunity now for people to have self-actualization in these other worlds, not virtual worlds, just other worlds. So maybe they have social challenges in the physical realm, but in this other world, they have the ability to star or shine or have other talents that can be developed. But the cool thing where I see cryptocurrency coming into Bitcoin is that they can now earn a living in this other world, and literally they can be at home plugged in, maybe a reverse type of matrix, but they're plugged in, they earn income in this other world, and all they need is nourishment, but now they have a currency earned in this other world,
right.
And they click a button and a drone drops it at their doorstep. They walk out. They might look like moles, right? No sunshine or anything. They walk in, they feed them, and they keep going. Now we have to, like you mentioned, we have to worry about reproduction of the human race and those things, but just observations. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that in. So.
No, I think that's an absolutely solid point. That's why I say, this magic internet reality that can be built, the magic internet money of Bitcoin is just made for it, and people can completely subsist within these realms, like that virtual overstock store. Anybody could set these things up for nothing. Literally for nothing. People could be building these entire experiences, shopping experiences, whatever the experience may be. Everything doesn't have to be about shopping. Okay, and yes, you could completely make money in there, but mainly because, look at this. Look, let me just show you an example of our older, you'll probably recognize this, but of our older monetary system. Smartphone. Dollar bill. Can't take it. It can't take it. How about a credit card? But earlier, I did a demo with Stephanie. We did Bitcoin, and inside of 2 seconds, all was done. All through this infrastructure. In fact, really, I think Bitcoin needed the smartphone as well. I don't know if computers alone would have been enough for Bitcoin to do what it does. But people already have the infrastructure to make all of this work, to make a completely new reality that just offsets what we already exist within. It's a really beautiful thing. This is a very exciting thing to get involved in. And like I said, what makes it more exciting is it doesn't cost anything to get involved with. I know companies, the company that made this, you know how much they spend to become a company? $4,000. That's it, $4,000. And they're banking right now, big time, just on cardboard and stereoscopic lenses. Okay, yeah. 5 minutes? Okay, any other questions? How about we got questions?
Anybody else here? I guess that's it. So, any other last comments you want to?
Oh, we got Will. Could we get Will on?
All right, Will. All right, we can count on Will.
Besides just supplying the meat sacks, how do you see the IRL world supporting VR besides just supplying the meat sacks and building it?
So define those terms for the
Like, besides just having users. And besides just building the tools and technologies, why would people want to leave virtual reality?
Why would they want to leave?
Yeah, and come back. And how will they ration that? It's kind of a follow-up to Stephanie's question, I guess.
Sure. I think there's people where that won't be for everyone. There's people who really want to kind of get their hands dirty. I think the ability of getting to, kind of like Stephanie's question, getting to like the point of the holodeck, that might be a good distance off. But if you're somebody who's stuck in, say, Argentina, or in some of these other areas where Bitcoin is like so important, I mean, imagine a virtual realm that they could very inexpensively get on board with and start taking advantage of that. What would support? What would keep all that infrastructure going? Outside of that, I mean, I think, yeah, like Stephen said, you still have people that would be making their complete lives and existence virtually. But I still feel like you'd have plenty of people that would be working maybe far less because maybe people would lose interest in pottery or doing all the things, all the infrastructure that we normally have. I mean, this is something, really kind of exciting to consider. Like, take the roads. I love talking about the roads. You take the roads, you think about like the signs for the speed limit and all this stuff. If you had on your windshield an augmented reality system where signs would just pop up on the screen, I mean, yeah, you wouldn't need that job. You wouldn't need entire infrastructures. I mean, things could be so inexpensive to put together. Building entire cities would be so inexpensive because there's so much that wouldn't be needed anymore just based around the technology of augmenting reality with these digital representations. Like, you would have signs that would show up and they could be changed instantaneously. Everything becomes so much less expensive when you start tossing representing things more digitally, just like with Bitcoin, where you don't have to have the printing press anymore, which, boy, wouldn't that save a whole lot of trees and a whole lot of money.